morning. I'm going to give the sermon now before the procession of the Holy Cross, just to give you a little bit of background on what we're doing. I remember when I was a young person that something would happen at the end of the liturgy without explanation, and afterwards we would hear the explanation of what we saw, and I thought it's more effective to tell you what is happening before it happens than after it happens, so that as we offer this procession, that you can derive some spiritual benefit from it. The sign of the cross initially was not something that people wore around with pride and with joy and with reverence as they wear it around today. The cross initially was a sign of humiliation and shame. On the cross were executed the worst of the criminals in the Roman Empire. To carry one's cross through the city on the way to your death was the worst shame you could bring on yourself and on your family. So when they decided the manner of death in which Christ was to die, they saved the very worst, most torturous, most shameful, most humiliating thing for him to do. The man who had worked miracles, the man who had given moral teachings, the man who told us to love our enemies, and forgive people, to him they consigned the worst possible punishment. And through the cross, we say in the hymns of the church that joy has come to all the world. Through this sign of shame has come the greatest joy that the human race has ever known. Because had Christ not been hung on the cross, had Christ not descended into Hades, had Christ not risen from the dead, then paradise would not have been open for the human race. Paradise would not have been open for the human race. On my mind, the last couple weeks, has been the theme of God's plan. God's plan for every life. God has a grand plan for every life. God has a grand plan for the world. When God made the world, his plan for the world was to create something perfect, create something wonderful, create a paradise. To put it in terms that you understand, and we understand, when you have a child, no one thinks about the bad things that child might do they? I mean, when you're planning on having kids, you don't say, let's create a child so that we have to nag him to clean his room or to do his homework, or that we have to stay up nights worrying about what he's doing when he's a teenager. No one makes a child like that. That's not the plan that you have when you have a child. Your plan is, I want to have fun with my child. I want to take my child interesting places. I want my child to make me laugh. I want my child to be someone that I take pride in. That's the plan. That's the grand plan that everyone who has a child has. Am I right? Is there anybody who had a different plan when they had a child? All right, maybe the plan didn't work out the way you dreamed it would work out, but that wasn't the plan when you started. So God's grand plan for the human race was for us to live in joy and in harmony with him. And that plan went awry. Did God make that part of the plan happen that way? No. God gave the human being that he created free will and said, you can have dominion over the whole earth. You can have mastery of everything. Just stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so the human being decided, I'm going to partake of that, and thus the fall happened. Now God's grand plan is still there through the person of Jesus Christ. The grand plan is still accessible to everybody. There is the opportunity to attain that state of paradise that God intended for us to have when he created us. The problem is there is something between us and paradise. That is called our life. No one enters into paradise in this life. Before the human being was created, before the fall, the human being was created and put right into paradise, inheriting paradise from the womb. Now, because of the fallen state that we are in, we must pass through this time called life on our way to the paradise of God. And at the end of life, there lies a judgment where God will judge whether we lived well enough to go into paradise or whether we did not. So God's grand plan is still there, paradise for everybody. And the roadmap there is our life. And our help along the road of life is the church and one another. Now sometimes God's grand plan is interrupted by us. 24 hours ago in our church, we had a funeral, actually 2 of them. And we laid to rest 2 people who were killed a week ago, Saturday, by someone. And this, I don't believe, is part of God's grand plan. I don't think that God plans for violence to happen in the world. Sometimes people are doing their thing, working their way to salvation, and something happens to them, either through their own mistake or through the mistake of somebody else, and that plan gets thwarted. The plan for the earthly life. The plan for the heavenly life is still there. It's just the plan for the earthly life is not intact. And there are many times in our earthly life that God's plan for us to have joy gets sort of derailed. That might be because of an illness, it might be because of a job loss, it might be because of a sudden relocation, or any number of things that we are dealing with. That was not part of God's plan for you and I to struggle along with these things. Again, God's plan was for us to be perfect like He is perfect, and live in paradise as He lives in paradise. So everybody in this life is struggling with something. Everybody's struggling with something. Everybody got a gift from God. There's no one who doesn't have a gift from God. And everybody has a struggle. And the struggle is brought on by us. That struggle may be that you came from an imperfect gene pool, which means that you have a learning disability, or you are thinking in a different way than other people are thinking. Your cross may be that you were born into poverty, and you are having a hard time crawling out of that. Your cross may be that your parents couldn't send you to college. Your cross may be that you just bounce from job to job and you can't hold down anything. Your cross may be troubled relationships. Whatever it is that the cross is, everybody has one. Everybody has one. And so this Sunday, the Sunday of the Holy Cross, as we get to the midpoint of Great Lent, the Church puts the cross in front of us for 2 reasons. Number 1, to remind us where the end of this journey is going. Some of you are becoming tired already from fasting and praying and services. I mean, even I have some moments where I'm like, gosh, hamburger would be good right about now. So it's good now, halfway through the journey, that we have something to point us toward where the end is, the cross and the resurrection of Christ. But the other thing that happens invariably during this Lenten period, when you are trying to pray, when you are trying to grow closer to God, do you think there's an army of cheerleaders for you? There are an army of angels that are rooting for you. And there's also an army of the devil's angels that are rooting against you. So the Lord says we should strengthen ourselves by focusing on what we're doing, focusing on where this journey is going. And everybody, whatever cross you're carrying in your life, we should be carrying that in a purposeful way, even in a reverent way, asking God for His help and trusting in God that if I just carry this cross with honor and with dignity, the way that the Lord carried His cross with honor and dignity, that when I get to the end of my earthly life, then I'm going to cross into the paradise of God that He promised to all those who have loved Him throughout the ages. As we make this procession, I ask that we will kneel in a moment and for you to pray. To pray for yourself, first of all, for the cross that you are carrying, whatever that cross may be. And then to pray for those around you, whether you know them or not. There are people in this community, I can tell you, because I know just about every one of you. There are people in this community that are carrying heavy crosses, some of you. Some people in this very congregation have serious illnesses, have serious concerns about their finances, about their children, about their marriages, about their futures. So pray for the people around you, that God gives all of us the strength to carry our crosses. And the other thing is that you should pray for opportunities to help other people to carry their cross. Even the Lord, when he was carrying his cross to Golgotha, had Simon of Cyrene that came to come and help him to carry his cross. This morning I sat down at the computer to check a couple of things before church, and the first thing the computer said to me was, "You can't get on right now because there's an important update that has to occur with your computer." We've all had that happen. And I was initially upset because I couldn't get on the computer for 15 minutes as it slowly rebooted 1%, 5%, 30%. I'm like, will it ever make it to the other side of the computer and reconfigure everything? And then it rebooted, and now it's working faster. But I had to pause and wait for that reconfiguration to occur. So now we pause our lives, and we get on our knees, and we ask God, please help me reconfigure the things in my life that need to be reconfigured, and give me the strength to reconfigure what needs fixing, and give me the focus and the hope and the joy that if I reconfigure throughout my life, pointing myself toward the cross of Christ, then one day I will be resurrected in glory with our Lord Jesus Christ. With that,